All right, everyone. I don't know that any of us could have anticipated where we stand with Oklahoma football after the last two showings, but we will try to do our best here in the next 60 minutes with all of your help to dissect what's happening with the Oklahoma football team, the program, Brent Venables, and staff. And we, of course, have Jason Ray here to help us break it down for an 84th edition of Oklahoma Sooners Live. Jason, my goodness, how you doing this week?
Doing good, Mark. I mean, it's like you said, I don't think anyone locally, nationally could have ever expected that it would be this much of a struggle this early. I know that there was some thoughts that, just from a transition perspective, this team could take a step back, but I thought, most people would think that step back would be, 7-5, 8-4, but this team is looking square in the face at a losing season, which into not extremely non-competitive games in a row. So there's certainly a lot of concern, I think, right now with the trajectory of this team, this this year's team. So we'll see how they can bounce back as they move forward through the last half of the year.
I want to remind everyone that Oklahoma Sooners Live is brought to you by Modern Day ABA on YouTube. Look it up, Modern Day ABA. Our friend Sarah dealing with handling and teaching preventative ways to cope with autism and those people that have autism. So we'll talk a little bit later in the show concerning Sarah's work. Again, Modern Day ABA. Right, Jason. Wow. Like you mentioned, I think of it this way. Okay, we know that this program, this team suffered personnel losses by way of the transfer portal. And of course, the NFL draft and people moving on. And also acquired some talent and maybe did not acquire as much talent as they lost. Okay. They were one of the 10 best teams in the country last year. They had to replace a top level quarterback. They replaced him with maybe I started to buy into Dylan Gabriel a little bit too much at one point, and of course he didn't play this past week. But I certainly, at the time that Caleb Williams was lost, Dylan Gabriel was signed through the transfer portal, thought initially, okay, they've acquired one of the 25 best quarterbacks in the country. Maybe it's a bit of a drawback from a talent standpoint, but still a very capable player, and I still think he is. But then maybe as we made our way through the off season and there was a lot of talk about what he could do with this offense, I started to buy into a little bit more of what was possible versus what I initially thought was a downgrade from the Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams level quarterback play at Oklahoma in the last 10 years, and thought, they're going to be fine. And then just to look at this team, when you bring in a capable coach, and again, even if there's been a downgrade in talent through the transfer portal losses, through the NFL draft, you bring in a capable coach and figure, yeah, maybe they take a step back. But what we've seen the last 2 weeks is just unfathomable that they would be playing, a couple teams that aren't going to be mistaken in any way for last year's Georgia team or some all-time great Alabama team. These aren't they're good football teams, but my goodness, they've been obliterated.
Yeah, no, I think the word that I hooked onto there, Mark, and it was the same word that I used in the post game is unfathomable, and on both sides of the ball, really. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to know where to start, Mark. I mean, it was so bad on both sides of the ball. So let's latch on to what you had mentioned from a Dylan Gabriel perspective. And so, yeah, and I think for me coming in, knew that he was a clear downgrade from what they've had in the past. And then when you look at this, it's hard when you if you haven't watched the games and you just look at his statistics. I think he's completing over probably in the mid 60 in percentage of passes, 11 touchdowns, no interception. And if you don't watch the game, if you haven't watched the games, you'll say, man, like he's just another great Oklahoma quarterback. But in the last couple of games, it's been a lot of overthrows and things like that. Just a lot of the mechanical things that's going on with him that certainly no one expected. One of the things that I heard consistently through spring and through fall camp was that he's a lot more accurate than I think they thought even coming in. So, so that's that's a I think a surprising narrative. I think that going into as we're here 6 games in, and to your point, obviously didn't play last week, but um, him 5 games into his Oklahoma Sooner career, that's not a narrative that I expected that we would be talking about this year. Was his lack of just missing guys, like missing big time throws. So we'll see if he's able to play. But the biggest thing that is just is it's mind boggling to me, unfathomable, whatever word that you want to use. A program that is as rich traditionally over the last 15, 20 years in the quarterback room, that Oklahoma is in the position that they are from a backup quarterback perspective, that they had to run. I mean, I don't know how much of the game you could actually stomach, Mark, on Saturday, but for about at least half of the snaps, they're running a junior high offense because they don't have a quarterback on this roster that's capable of consistently completing a forward pass. 38 yards passing for Davis Bevel. Half of those that he completed were not on target, were not good passes. Receivers just made good plays on. He was having problems just completing a bubble screen, throwing the ball at people's feet. And I think that's the part that's the most concerning for me. Yes, I get the fact that you lost 2 5-star quarterbacks. You've lost some guys in previous cycles. Chandler Morris is at TCU. Tanner Mordecai moved over to SMU. So I get there's been some changes, but there's other programs across the country that are playing from time to time. They'll play with backup quarterbacks, and they can. I mean, they're not obviously. You don't expect the backup to be as good as the starter. That's the reason why he's the backup. But for that to be what Oklahoma had to put out there on Saturday, and for that to be the game plan, that in no real knock on Jeff Levy. I mean, I'm not inside those walls. That's what they thought gave them the best chance to win this game and to be competitive in this game. And so, I know a lot of people. Why didn't General Booty play? Why didn't Nick Evers play more? Which so to me shows like these guys know much more than I do. Shows the lack of where those guys are at. Being in position to play this game, knowing what you saw from Davis Bevel, and I don't know, Mark. We talked about him early on. He was, yes, I get he was a third string quarterback at Pitt last year, but he was decent. He made one really really bad throw in that bowl game last year, but he was decent. Like for him this year, it looks like it's just moving way too fast. He looks like he's a first year player that's never, that has very limited experience in the position. So that's the major concern for me offensively. Now defensively, like it's a long laundry list of issues. They're not getting pressure on the quarterback. They're not tackling well. They're not covering in the back end when they do cover. They're not playing the ball. Tons of pass interference penalties. I guess the one silver lining, I guess, which maybe is even worse than last week, in a way. The previous week, against TCU, there was tons of busts. There was busts in the secondary that allowed for big plays. Against Texas, there wasn't really any busts, but it was just consistent, long drives. And I get it. Like Texas is a good football team. But I think as we move forward here, Mark, and I heard this earlier this week. Yes, the competition's better, but But is Texas that much better than Nebraska? Is TCU that much better than Nebraska? Is Texas 80 points better than Nebraska? So, and that's rhetorical in nature, right? Because we know that's not the case. They're better, obviously, but they're not that much better. So
Great point. Yeah.
the change from the first three games to the last three games is something that I've never seen in this program. I don't know that I've ever seen it in any sporting team to go from, outside of like losing a lot of players or changing schemes or anything like that. I don't know that I've ever seen a switch. Um, right now, this team is the worst team in the Big 12, and I don't know that it's particularly close. West Virginia is probably the only one um, that can make that claim. Um, and I don't know. Like if I was a true betting man, I know that we give our on the Discord we give our picks. Um, I would lean towards betting my mortgage on Kansas this week. I'm not saying that Oklahoma can't win the game, but I think the line's up to like 9.5, 10 points at this point. I think it opened at 7, so it's went up in Oklahoma's favor. Just where Oklahoma is right now on both sides of the ball. Still not knowing if Dylan Gabriel is going to be able to play. Still in concussion protocol. So I don't know, Mark. There's just a lot of things going, and I don't think anyone, worst case scenario, thought it would ever get this bad this early. Now, obviously there's precedence for not this bad, right? But Nick Saban went 6-6 his first year. I think Dabo Swinney was the same. Bob Stoops was 7-5 his first year at Oklahoma. But these are non-competitive games right now. Kansas State, that was a competitive game. Obviously, they didn't play well, but it was a competitive game. But the last two games, they didn't show up, and the effort wasn't there completely. It was there at times, but so I don't know what they do from here, Mark. I mean, as we talked about this before the season as well. This season coming into it for Oklahoma was a little bit different in terms of they didn't have any first team all Big 12 selections on either side of the ball except for the punter. They weren't the prohibitive favorite to win the Big 12. They weren't. They were one of the favorites, obviously, but maybe not necessarily a consensus favorite, and they weren't necessarily a favorite to get to a playoff spot. So um, now you reevaluate your goals and know that you're going to have at this point a great second half of the season just to get to bowl eligibility. Because you look at the schedule, the way they've played over the last two games, it's 2 wins at the most. I mean, that's a stretch right now. So, there's always rumors when things go wrong, that there's problems in the locker room and that there's, the team's not buying in. I don't know what it is, Mark, but it's something. It's something because they don't have this, the talent isn't quite that you alluded to in the front. The talent may be a little bit of a drop off, but there's not that much of a talent gap between Texas and Oklahoma. There's not that much of a talent gap between TCU and Oklahoma. So there's some intangible that's reigning supreme here, right? They're not completely bought into what Venables is selling at this point. They've got too much, damage, PTSD from the last few years, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, that they're not mentally strong as they need to be to come back from when they struggle. But whatever it is, there's something intangibly that's going on that's causing this just terrible play over the last 2 weeks.
There's so many different directions we can take this. I'll start with the betting line. So I have not looked at any of the betting lines for this week. You bring it up with Oklahoma, Kansas, and I am really good at, and I'm not a betting guy, odds maker, handicapper, nothing. I'm a complete novice, but I'm really good at, for some reason, when people throw me a game, I can usually say, okay, they're going to be about a 13.5 point favorite. And I'm usually within like a point. I don't know what I would have said about the point spread for this game because Vegas tends to take its time in changing its opinion on a team. They don't just knee jerk reaction. Okay, Oklahoma lost to TCU by 30 points. Okay, we're totally off the Oklahoma bandwagon, and we've totally adjusted our opinion of this team. They're usually not like that. It takes them a while. So if you would have thrown the Kansas Oklahoma game at me, I don't know what I would have said in terms of a point spread. And as you mentioned, I see Oklahoma early in the week at 7. You say that it's gone up from there, where I would think conventional wisdom would be that the betting public would bet that down based on the way the two teams have played. But we do know that Jalen Daniels, the Kansas starting quarterback, has been ruled, or I don't know that he's been ruled out for the game, but it appears as though it is highly unlikely that he's going to play in the game. They do have a capable backup, Jason Bean, who played the majority of the game against TCU, put up a ton of points. He's not Jalen Daniels, but he's been the starting quarterback at Kansas. He's a decent player and is capable. So yeah, that's one aspect of this. Is Oklahoma's a favorite against a Kansas team that has played so much better than they have the last 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah, the next portion of this is just that. Had you told me at this point in the season Oklahoma would be 3-3, I would think, okay, yeah, that's a disappointment. They're probably losing nail biters. Like the results aren't what we would expect, but had the last 2 weeks been 31-28, then I think Oklahoma fans would be disappointed with the results because they expected to be competitive for the league championship, but it would at least be understandable. It's a first year. Okay, the team's still competitive. They're still playing hard. They're still in the games. But you're right. It's just to take Nebraska as some kind of barometer. And Nebraska is not a good football team, but they don't get blasted by anybody. In this, 2 years of them losing by 1 score to everyone, and the great case example is them coming to Norman last year and losing by a touchdown. That's what they do against good teams. They play them really tough. And Oklahoma could have named the score in that game.
Right.
Blasted them.
Mm-hmm.
Defensively shut them down. Offensively scored, 35 in the first half?
Mm-hmm.
Could have kept it rolling after that. So you go from that high of beating not a good team, but a team that stays competitive with just about anybody. And then the next week, that Kansas State game was kind of what I would have expected had you said Oklahoma's going to have a down year. They're going to go 7-5. Okay. Yeah, that's about what I would expect. Kansas State, again, better team than Nebraska. Not a great team by any stretch. They just beat Iowa State by 1 point this past weekend. Kansas State's they're a top 30 team in the country.
Yeah.
So that's what I would have envisioned struggling looking like. Playing Kansas State, this back and forth game, and then losing it in the fourth quarter. But what we've seen the last 2 weeks is just, I was about to say unfathomable again. It's just, you can take almost any team in America and line them up against TCU and Texas, and they're not going to lose. They're not going to give up 55, and they're not going to lose by 49.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is, and that's why when we started it's hard. Like you say, we could take this in a lot of directions, and I mentioned it's hard to know where to start because at a minimum, Mark, with what BV believes in, what he instills in these kids, is is effort, is toughness, is physicality, accountability. And those things aren't, they were there in the first 3 games, but they haven't been there the last 3 games. So yeah, I don't know. And just to go back to your betting line, I just looked, and right now it's 9, started at 7. I mean, and this is with Gabriel's availability unknown at this point. I mean, you would think that he would be ready to go, after a full 2 weeks, but um, yeah, I mean, even with Kansas, I mean, you had mentioned that Bean had an excellent second half for Kansas, threw for almost 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, did throw the one interception. But yeah, I mean, there's a drop off there, obviously, but not a considerable amount. So yeah, I don't know, Mark. I mean, I think things could get even worse if it's possible if they lose this game to Kansas. I mean, Kansas is a much improved team, right? They're so much better than they have been in the past. But I think just the mental side of it, losing to Kansas, I think is a would certainly not be surprising. I don't think to a lot of people, but still would be kind of a shot in the arm. And so yeah, there's and this is why you have to continue to go back. There's something intangible going on.
Yeah.
Um, whether it's there's not belief in Ted Roof as the defensive coordinator, whether there's just they're just worn out because of the lack of the fit, or because of how physical everything was in the summer and in the fall, and these kids just aren't used to it, so their bodies are wearing down a little bit quicker than um, things like that. So I don't know. I don't know, honestly, if those are excuses or if that's reality, or what it is. And now you've got kids that are used to playing for championships, right? I mean, some of the newer ones, maybe not as much, but the guys that have been there for a long time is um, they're used to playing for championships, winning championships, and now that they're in the thralls of a mediocre season, how do they react to that? Particularly if they start playing some young guys, how do these older guys handle that? What does the locker room look like? Um, so yeah, I don't know, how that will continue to look as this season goes on, but I mean, the good news is they still have the number three. They actually have the number three rated recruiting class in the country still for 2023. So, I mean, I don't know how much damage the rest of the season is going to do. The other thing that I'll mention is, I'm not, I think this is probably true for all fan bases, but I think Oklahoma's a little bit extra. When it comes to these things, when things are going bad, a coach needs to go. Where I stand in that is it's very hard to make coaching changes in the middle of the year for one, and I'm specifically talking about like coordinator, assistant coaches. I mean, you're not gonna get rid of a head coach 6 games into the season unless there's like big problems outside of what we're seeing, even outside of the football field. But then you got so but when you look at this and you see that 6 games in, you're probably not going to fire any assistant coaches. However, what I will say is if this team goes 3-9, if this team goes 4-8, the nature of the beast is something's going to happen. I don't know if that's Ted Rue from a defensive coordinator perspective, or who that is, but um, at a school that has huge expectations, like Oklahoma, you have to someone has to answer for a if it's a 3-9, a 4-8, 5-7 type of season, someone's got to take the fall for that. And so I don't know who that will be, if it will be someone, but it will, if this continues, it will probably happen, just because a down season for this team, most thought was 7-5. If you have a lot of injuries and a lot of just bad things happen, maybe 6-6, absolute worst case scenario. And so, like I said, this team they're going to have to they're gonna have to overachieve, I think, based on the way they're playing now to get there. And so you have to kind of, I think, Mark, anytime things happen like this, you almost take a step back and think about, how did it get this bad, this quickly. And you'd mentioned Oklahoma being the top 10 team, last year towards the end of the season. And last year's team, as we know, was a little bit of a smoke and mirrors type of situation. They finished, they finished only losing the 2 games, but they had opportunities to lose, 3 or 4 of those games. But I think the difference is those were even if they would have lost those games, those were competitive games. But these aren't. So I think going forward, what you look for is effort, toughness, physicality, those things, as much as you can. I think effort's the number one thing, right? But um, I think getting some of those younger kids some time. I know that I've heard, through some sources that DJ Graham's moving to the offensive side of the ball. They're going to get some of these younger guys and guys that haven't played as much, more time at the in the defensive secondary. I think CJ Colden, the transfer from Wyoming, is probably gonna get in there and play a little bit more than he has been. Um, so yeah, I think it'll be, intriguing to see how this continues to move forward. In what is unfortunately become more of a development type of season.
From a personnel standpoint, the most obvious subtractions from this team are Caleb Williams, Mario Williams, Jaden Hazelwood, Kennedy Brooks, the first 3 because of transfers. And that's just on the offensive side. So there's a number of comments being made in the chat about Lincoln Riley. So you wonder how much, based on what you just outlined of the performance last year that finished black and white 11-2, but there were a lot of shaky performances. Maybe they weren't that good. How much of this is because Lincoln Riley left? You lose this great coach. He took all these players with him. Other players went elsewhere. And how much of it was already unraveling or deteriorating even with Lincoln Riley had he stayed?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Mark. Yeah, I mean, I think if he had stayed with Oklahoma, you wouldn't have seen this type of season, right? I mean, they would have. I think by and large, they probably would have held together all the recruits. Spencer Rattler was going to leave regardless, so it wouldn't have mattered if he was here. Obviously, Caleb Williams would still be here. Um, I think you're probably kind of the same team that you were a year ago, and that they have been. I think this team would be much better offensively. I think maybe better suited offensively, but probably on the defensive side of the ball, you wouldn't. You would certainly be better than what they've played thus far, right, this year, which is mind-boggling to say 6 weeks into the year. I don't think anyone necessarily would have said that USC has a much better defense than Oklahoma this year. But yeah, I think but I don't think they were going to win a national championship with Lincoln Riley based on the way they believed in winning. Now I can be wrong. I could be wrong. They could go through the Pac-12, make the playoffs this year, and prove me wrong, and a lot of other Oklahoma um, fans and people wrong, and at least win a playoff game. But so I think that's part of it, right? Mark took some of his recruits with him, took some of the players you'd mentioned, Caleb Williams and Mario Williams, Jaden Hazelwood went to Arkansas. You've got 3 or 4 guys off the defensive side of the ball that went to the NFL. You've got just defections, just in general moving on. Um, so yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think it's a combination of the recruits that they left, a combination of a lot of the talent that they that left on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's a combination of what's happening this year in terms of kind of the buy-in um, situation. I think a lot of people, maybe including myself, expected miracle work in a strength and conditioning program in just one off season, where that takes a couple of years to build to where you want it to be. And so maybe even more importantly for what's going on is how important it's going to be for them to hold on to this recruiting class, for one, and then two, I mean, I think they're probably going to have to be really, really active in the portal in the off season, because there's already some talk about a decent amount of defections from this team, moving forward. So we'll see how that plays out. Obviously, when you're in the midst of the storm, so to speak, it's a little bit of a whirlwind. You can't really see too far ahead. You're only seeing, you know 5 feet in front of you. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, I just generally speaking, I think it's a manifestation of a lot of different things, timing and when he left, guys that left, and then just you know, people that left the program to go to the NFL or wherever that might have been.
Yeah, I thought we might be at this stage in the season defending Brent Venables, saying, okay, the record's 3-3, but they lost this game by 3. They lost this game by a touchdown. And sometimes the transition from one coach to another means you have to take a step back before you can go forward. But just the level of play on the field the last 2 weeks is just alarming beyond belief. All right, everyone. 1 in 44 children are now estimated to be on the autism spectrum. And with the prevalence of this disorder increasing, it's important for parents and caregivers to know the signs of autism and the steps that you can take to make sure that your children have the support they need. Sarah Morris is a board certified behavior analyst in Oklahoma. She specializes in early intervention autism treatment. She has a YouTube channel called Modern Day ABA. She uses her platform to educate the world about autism and to share strategies and resources for caregivers and families. Again, her name's Sarah. You can find her YouTube channel at Modern Day ABA. It's right on the banner. Her contact information and social media links are in the description section of every video here at the Voice of College Football OU. If you or someone you know might benefit from these resources, be sure to check it out. Again, it's Sarah at Modern Day ABA. All right. Yes, the recruiting class. I don't know what goes through the minds of 18-year-olds when they see something like this. I know that regardless of what kind of relationships have been built and what I'm hearing from the head coach and my potential position coach, I'd think, wow, this is supposed to be a good team. This is supposed to be a great program, and they're getting blown out. I guess I'd try to be measuring just, can I believe what I'm hearing? Can I believe what I'm being told about where this program's headed if these are the latest results? The impact on recruiting is obviously not positive. It may be negative. Brent Venables and his staff hope that it's just neutral, that they're not buying into the recruits, meaning aren't buying into the results on the field right now, and they're going to believe the message and the relationship building, and they're going to make those decisions based on the commitments that they've already made, and it doesn't hurt this recruiting class that's roughly a top 5 class for 2023.
Yeah, I think the positive news at this point, right, we're obviously a long way from signing day, but I think the positive news, like during and after um, the game Saturday, was a lot of them were very positive towards where they're at with Oklahoma. Um, Jaquays Petaway has posted a lot of positive things for Oklahoma. You had Dalen Smothers had posted a lot of positive things for Oklahoma. Um, Colton Vasek was a little bit back and forth. He was liking a lot of Texas stuff, but he has kind of come out and said that right now he's still firm in his commitment to Oklahoma. I mean, he's not really wavering. He didn't say anything like that. He's still firm in where he's at. So I think there's a lot of, at least right now, there's a lot of positive on that. But it is October 12th, and we're a long ways away from signing day here. So we'll see how that continues to move forward. But I've always thought it's interesting, Mark, that trying to get into the mind of a 17, 18-year-old is tricky business. But but I think there's two schools of thought when you're looking um, when you're looking at this, particularly with the season that Oklahoma's having. Do these kids, are they salivating at the chance because they think, oh, this is the product that's on the field right now? I should be able to go in and not only compete but have a starting spot immediately on this team. Or like, this team is not playing well. This team is not good. I want to go to Texas A&M, or I want to go to Alabama, or I want to go to Georgia, or wherever it is that they're thinking about. So that's always been, I mean, and I don't know the answer. It's kind of, I guess, rhetorical in nature, but I guess we'll see. It'll obviously play out, but I think there's probably a little bit of both kids in both camps, right? I mean, but the thing that I think a lot of people maybe don't necessarily remember or realize or take into consideration, a lot of these kids, um, they're committing to a coach. They're committing, whether it's whoever's recruiting, whether it's a position coach or a head coach. A lot of them aren't necessarily committing to a school, but it's more so that coach. So so as long as these guys keep the positivity up and keep after it with these kids um, that they're recruiting, I think I think it should be able to remain positive. But 3-9 speaks volumes. 4-8 speaks volumes for that team. If that's how this team ends up the season. Um, so yeah, we'll see how that continues to go. But I haven't the Colton Vasek is the only one that I've seen some areas on social media where he seems to be playing both sides. But some of the recruiting insiders have spoken with him, and he looks like he is going to remain a Sooner at this point in time, but with a lot of time left to go.
Well, I can certainly appreciate a number of people in the chat who are optimistic and just believe that this is a storm that needs to be weathered, and a lot of these players are going to be much better and better developed in their skills and strength and conditioning next year and ready to play. So
I will say, and on that fact, Mark, I think when you uh, coming into the season, I thought this year could be a possibility that they could win a Big 12 championship. Obviously, I think almost all of us were way wrong, certainly with that. But and I think some people thought next year was the year that this team would very much be able to contend, and possibly win a playoff game. I think this year will increase that development time, right? I mean, it's hard to go from where they're at now to go to a championship. So I think patience is going to have to be something that Oklahoma fans make themselves familiar with over the next, I think, couple of years, because it's with as bad as it's gotten this year, it's going to take. I think it's going to take another year for them to get closer to where they, to where they want to be. And so, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I don't think anyone's betting against Brent Venables, right? I mean, I think a lot of people thought that this was a really good hire for Oklahoma, and I think it still is, for Oklahoma. But there's a lot of guys that are ready to be a head coach, and um, everyone thinks it's a good hire, and it ends up not, for whatever reason, maybe not necessarily the individual coach, but it's just not a great fit, for him and his style and stuff like that. So that remains to be seen. I don't know. Not that it's an that he shouldn't be fired, but if he's losing the locker room and there's not buy-in now, I think that's just something that's probably concerning. Not to the level of he needs to be on the hot seat or anything like that a year, 6 games into a season, but with that, that's going to be a big challenge for him to get those kids to buy in, because it's they're the effort's just not there right now.
And again, I'm racking my brain. I'm trying to come up with some kind of an example that would parallel what we're seeing right now. And I keep running into, for example, Sark last year. He was losing games. They finished 5-7, but they were in every game. They're losing excruciatingly difficult, close games at the one. So it's just not comparable. Yeah, I'm just not coming up with the situation where a team looks this bad after being that good. And again, I understand that we can qualify how good they were last year. They certainly were one of the 20 best teams in the country. I know they finished in the top 10, but even if we put a disclaimer on them being able to struggle through smoke and mirrors on a few games, they were still clearly one of the 20 best teams in the country last year, even at their worst. And just to see it flip like this is, rather alarming. Wanted to hit you up on the quarterback situation that you've obviously addressed. But let's say, and you aren't at the practices, very few are, even the credentialed media only gets to see these guys stretch a little bit, and they get thrown off the field. So we can't know if, let's say, a Nick Evers is just not ready and showing that clearly in practice. Let's say that nobody's outstanding in practice, nobody's awful in practice, and clearly showing that they can't make the right decisions on the field and lead the team down the field. What would you do in regards to if Dylan Gabriel's not ready to play? Would you continue to try Davis Bevel out there based on what you've seen, or would Nick Evers be your guy?
Yeah, I think Nick Evers would be my guy. He was the guy that I was secretly kind of hoping would get the nod against Texas. Now I understand. I mean, you don't want to put a kid out there that's absolutely not ready and just absolutely destroy his confidence in his development. So I understand that component of it. But I think, based on the first 3 games when Davis Bevel got in some time, and what we've seen in the second half against TCU, um, in the game against Texas, I think I've seen enough of what he can do to know that he is incapable of moving this team down the field. Um, from a passing, like I said, 38 yards passing on 6 completions last week with the interception. So, and I think the general consensus is Nick Evers and or General Booty over Bevel. I think that was the general consensus before the game. I think that's has been even more kind of, not, I wouldn't say vindicated, but definitely just in terms of other opportunities. But yeah, there's reasons. There's reasons why Jeff Lebby and the team thought that this was the best opportunity, but opportunity for them to win the game. It's hard to believe, right? I mean, it's hard to believe the offense that they ran half the time, and kind of the playbook that they had for there for Davis Bevel, that he that gave Oklahoma the best chance to to win this game. But I would go over youth. I would go youth going forward. I mean, Bevel was a third string quarterback at Pitt. Nick Evers was a 4-star guy. So yeah, just on, and to your point, Mark, just on the outside looking in, obviously neither of us are in practice, and I mean, Evers could be, he could be one of those kids in practice that he's not as familiar with the playbook as Davis Bevel is. He's not able to run the team as well as Davis Bevel was, just from an organization perspective. But I would certainly give him an opportunity. And I don't know, Mark. I mean, I would, and maybe this is overreaction. I think I would probably give. I don't know that I would want to see Bevel anymore, just because, like I said, I mean, if you have to use him, yeah, but um, I mean, when I say you have to use him, if you have multiple injuries, but I think you've seen all that you really need to see to know that he's not going to be able to get the job done for Oklahoma. So,
Yeah,
go ahead.
we appreciate everybody that took part in our poll. So this is going into the Texas game. So this was 5 days ago that this was posted, but I just wanted to acknowledge and recognize everybody that they responded to the poll that Jason posted leading into the Texas game. And it's interesting to note, this is before the Davis Bevel performance against Texas. And even him being the second string quarterback, even him being the guy that hit on 14 of 18 passes in the Peach Bowl last year, that the Oklahoma fan base, based on 1,200 votes, and we appreciate everybody responding, that Nick Evers was still the choice, even going into the Texas game, overwhelmingly over Davis Bevel and General Booty. We also had, let's see, another poll where simply we asked for the winner here, and we understand this is an Oklahoma channel, so despite Texas looking much better going into the game, hey, even though I picked Texas to win the game, I thought, yeah, give me that touchdown. This is always a one-score game regardless, so shoot, Oklahoma's going to bounce back. They're going to show a lot of pride and pull things together from the TCU game. So Texas should win this game, but shoot, I'll take the 7 or 7.5 points. So I don't fault anyone there, especially on an Oklahoma channel, expecting the Sooners, or hoping, I think more, that's a hopeful vote right there for the Sooners. And then I posted this a few days ago. How do you perceive the current state of Oklahoma football, which is maybe difficult to quantify, but I try to put out 3 statements there that would kind of be separate lines of thinking. One, hey, this is pathetic and embarrassing. One, okay, it's concerning, but I'm not panicking. And one, hey, give Brent Venables time. He's building a program. It's only 6 games. It's only 2 lousy performances. It takes time. And hey, whether right or wrong, or whether any of us are proven right or wrong in the long term, we just have to wait and see. I'll certainly say I'm impressed with the patience, because usually college football fans are not like this, to say, hey, give him time. He's building a program. 60%.
Yeah, that's honestly, I mean, that's the area where I'm at. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Mark, I'm a little surprised that was the the overwhelming vote. So
Out of
no,
1,200 people.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree absolutely with that. Yeah, I mean, that's the right approach. That's the approach that you have to have at this point. He's building the program his way in a lot of in a lot of different ways. And I think what's going to be a challenge for him, I think what they would like, and I think what the fans would like is, competitive games. I think you've got to, like I said, we've talked about this. We've beat this horse to death, but two consecutive games where Oklahoma didn't even compete in the game. Not at all against Texas, and outside of probably the first, even a little bit of the first quarter against TCU was just a bloodbath where teams could conceivably um, could conceivably um, give up 70 points in either one of these two games. So, and you're thinking, Mark, that when you look at the rest of the season, you still got at this point. Now, I think Texas is definitely going to be in the conversation for the Big 12 championship this year. Without a doubt, with the way that they're playing right now. But you also think about, you've got two teams, even though it's at home, that are probably a little bit better than Texas, at least right now, in Oklahoma State and Baylor. Maybe not Baylor, but still, a lot as tough, if not tougher, games than Texas. So yeah, I agree with that. However, and I'm in that camp, but you've got to be competitive in some of these games. If they continue these games where they're just getting blown out, then I'm still there. But I think he's got a much bigger challenge than I think he ever thought he had. Specifically when he came in here, one of the things that he kind of reminisced on is when him and Bob and the staff came in 1999 and said, he made the statement that this program and this team is in a much, much better spot than what it was in 99. And right now it doesn't appear like it is. But again, teams can turn it around. They just need a couple of good things to happen early on. What's been the big thing against Kansas State last three games, and even UTEP, is they've gotten down early. In all of these games, they were obviously they were down early against Texas early and often. They were down early against TCU, and then got down a couple of scores against Kansas State, but fought their way back a little bit in that one. So yeah, they just need something good to happen to give them a little bit of confidence, because their confidence is, I would assume, not inside that locker room, about as low as it could possibly be right now.
All right, Oklahoma, Kansas get together coming up in Norman this Saturday. I haven't checked the schedule. What is a game time and network on that one?
It is 11 a.m. I believe. I'll have to look at network here while we're talking. I think it's on the
ESPN2.
Yeah, I was going to say ESPN2 or ESPNU. I couldn't remember, but yes. So, yep. We'll get it cranked out here on post game as we always do. Hopefully we can talk about something positive this week.
God bless you, Jason. I got to say that fortunately, when I talk to our various team channels and our great contributors on each one of these, and so just so everyone knows, we don't have an Oklahoma channel without Jason. So Jason makes it all work right here on our Voice of College Football OU channel. We've done this 84 consecutive weeks, and he has cranked out all these post-game shows for the last two seasons. But yeah, when I see Texas 49-0, I think, my goodness, poor Jason. He's going to have to jump. He's got to watch this football. I at least get the luxury of picking and choosing what games I watch and what I want to focus on in regards to my college football content creation. But of course, Jason lives and breathes and dies with Oklahoma football, and he's been great in delivering post game here. So join him after the Kansas game. It should be an interesting one, with the Sooners as a still solid 7 to 10 point favorite at home against Kansas. Okay. Interesting. And if they trot out, it's the opening kickoff, practically the opening kickoff, and it's minutes before kick. And we determine that, Dylan Gabriel can't go and Davis Bevel is going to be the starter, I'm sure that there's going to be a rush of people going online to bet that game as fast as possible before they put toe to leather.
Yep, I think you're right, and I think there'll probably be a riot in Norman, Oklahoma if that were if that were to happen as well.
So you're pretty confident if Dylan Gabriel can't go that it's going to be Nick Evers.
Oh no! I'm not
Okay.
confident in the least of that being
Okay.
the case. I'm just saying that this is what I think, and I think this is what the fan base thinks. Honestly, like if I'm looking at it objectively, I think they probably will continue to go with Bevel because their Venables is very strong on the fact that he doesn't want to throw freshmen into the lion's den. So we'll see if he changes that now that that some of the goals are outside there. Yeah, if I were a betting man right now, if Gabriel is unable to go, I think that Bevel probably continues to start.
Before we take off, Jason, do you have any thoughts about Micah Bowens, the Penn State transfer?
Yeah, so there's tons of talk about him. So he's actually moved. I mean, he could still play quarterback, but I think he's moved more, to the wide receiver side of things. So he's helping out as a wide receiver. Yeah, he's just. I mean, he's just not at that level, even from what I've been told. And again, you just have to trust these coaches and um, in they're seeing these guys every single day. They're evaluating the way they're practicing. Maybe he's a kid that's he's not a good practicer, and so maybe he's not there because of that reason. But that's like I said, that's the only thing that if all of us were able to see practice and watch what's going on, then maybe we could make more informed. But we're just, I mean, I think at this point we're just guessing and assuming who we think that would be better. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if who trots out there if Gabriel can't go.
And folks, take this in one more time because it may affect you or your family, your friends, your loved ones at some point. Just consider that about 2% plus of children are estimated to be on the autism spectrum. The prevalence of the disorder is increasing. It's important for parents and caregivers to know the signs of autism and the steps that need to be taken to support the children. Sarah Morris is a board certified behavior analyst in Oklahoma. She specializes in early intervention autism treatment. She's got a YouTube channel. You see it right there, Modern Day ABA. Check it out, Modern Day ABA. She uses her platform to educate the world about autism, to share strategies and resources for caregivers and families. Her name's Sarah. Again, you see the YouTube channel, Modern Day ABA. Check it out. You can get all the resources that you need as well. If you look at the description section of any of the videos here at the Voice of College Football OU, you can see the link to find out more about autism and how to support those children. All right. Once again, it's OU Sooners Live. Come on back next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time. Bring a friend or 50 with you, and we'll talk Oklahoma football. And it will be quite intriguing to see how the team responds and performs this week at home against the Kansas Jayhawks. Jason, we appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your week and the football weekend.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. You too.